Good morning. I want to introduce our guest speaker, but first I want to read about the Endowed Fund. The Paley Family Endowment, established in 2006 by Valerie and Jeffrey Paley, class of '56, supports the Paley Lectures, an annual program of visiting speakers. Invited speakers address the school community on current events of major significance such as government, journalism, foreign affairs, environment, and civil liberties, in order to provide you, Taft students, with the opportunity to be inspired by the value and dignity of lives filled with purpose and commitment. So I'm very delighted to bring our guest speaker here today. Let me share a few things about him. Bob Herbert joined Demos after an 18-year career at the New York Times as an op-ed columnist, writing about politics, urban affairs, and social trends in a twice-weekly column. From January 1991 to May of 1993, Mr. Herbert was a national correspondent for NBC and reported regularly on the Today Show and NBC Nightly News. A founding panelist of Suddenly Edition, a weekly discussion program on WCBS TV, Mr. Herbert was also the host of Hotline, a weekly hour-long issues program on WNYC TV, both beginning in 1990. Previously, Mr. Herbert worked at the Daily News beginning in 1976. His positions at the Daily News included general assignment reporter, national correspondent, consumer affairs editor, city hall bureau chief, and city editor. In 1985, he became a columnist and a member of the editorial board. His column continued to appear in the Daily News until February of 1993. His career began in 1970 as a reporter, then night city editor in 1973 of the Star-Ledger in Newark, New Jersey. Born in Brooklyn, New York, Mr. Herbert earned his Bachelor of Science degree in journalism at the State University of New York, Empire State College. He has taught journalism at Brooklyn College and also at Columbia University School of Journalism. He has won numerous awards, including the Meyer Berger Award for coverage of New York City, the American Society of Newspaper Editors Award for distinguished newspaper writing, the David Nyan Prize from the Shorenstein Center at Harvard University for excellence in political reporting, and the Ridenhour Courage Prize for the fearless articulation of unpopular truths. Mr. Herbert is also the author of Promises Betrayed, Waking Up from the American Dream, Times Books 2005, and he is currently on work on a new book, Wounded Colossus. Mr. Herbert is married, he lives in Manhattan, he's a big New York Jets fan, and let us welcome Bob Herbert.
Oh yeah, that Jet thing always gets a laugh. Buffalo can deal with Rex Ryan now. Good morning. Thank you so much. You always wonder whether anybody's going to show up at these things. So here we have a full house. Maybe it's a captive audience, but I'll take it. Bob, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm going to get started right away. We're on a tight schedule, so let's have at it. I love those stupid criminal stories that you find on the web. One of my favorites is about a guy in South Carolina who became impatient as he was coming to the end of a 4-month prison term. With just 3 hours left before he was to be released, he thought it might be a good idea, seeing the opportunity to escape, to seize that opportunity. So he bolted from a recreation session and fled. That is a quintessential example of bad decision-making. The escapee was soon captured and sent back to jail for another 6 months, which was 2 months longer than his original sentence. Then there was the ex-convict who robbed a bank and was surprised when the police showed up at his home a short while later to arrest him. "How'd you know it was me?" he asked. "I used the juice." The cops had no idea what he was talking about. It turned out that he had rubbed lemon juice on his face because someone had told him that that would make it impossible for the security cameras to record his image. He went into the bank thinking of himself as the invisible man. One more. A guy stole a car. When the victim described the car to the police, she told them her phone was in it. So a cop called the number. The thief answered, and the cop said, "I saw your ad in the newspaper and I am interested in buying your car." Sure enough, they made an appointment. The thief showed up with the car and was arrested. These are amusing examples of utter incompetence, and they're funny because the consequences are not too horrendous. But sometimes there are consequences to aspects of our behavior, to our lack of awareness, our immaturity, our personal beliefs or obsessions that are far more serious than the silly examples that I've just given you. What I hope to achieve with the talk today is to get you to look more closely at the world around you and think more seriously about people and events outside of your comfort zone of school and home and family. Because while it may not seem obvious right now, you very bright and very fortunate young men and women will come to learn that you are ultimately responsible for the world that you're living in and that your children and grandchildren will grow up in. That world in many ways is wonderful, even fabulous. Some youngsters get to go to extraordinary schools like this one. Scientific and technological advances have improved our health and lengthened our lives. We live in a country that, compared to many others, has a great deal of freedom and offers tremendous occupational and professional opportunities. We have an abundance of art and music and movies and theater and sports of every kind. But there are other not-so-pleasant realities that many of us would rather not think about. So there is a tendency to turn our backs and close our eyes, and this willful lack of awareness allows us to remain indifferent to the plight of others who are less fortunate, men and women and children who warrant our attention and often our help and support. So I'll tell you a couple of stories today. I'm sure you've heard about the protests against police shootings and other forms of violence and disturbing conduct by police officers that have upset a lot of people and led to large demonstrations in Ferguson, Missouri, and other cities and towns across America, including in New York City, which is where I live. One of those cases occurred in Cleveland and resulted in the death of Tamir Rice, who was 12 years old. A little less than a week before Thanksgiving, Tamir was playing outdoors with a pellet gun that looked like a real weapon. Someone called the police and said some guy was pointing a probably fake pistol outside a community recreation center. Probably fake were the exact words that the caller used. The police responded in a patrol car and pulled up beside Tamir. Now, it was a quiet afternoon. There was no one else around, and Tamir was not threatening anybody, but he had that pellet gun. I watched the video. The cops never hesitated. The car pulled up. The cop on the passenger side hopped out with his gun drawn, and in no more than 3 or 4 seconds, he shot Tamir at point-blank range. Did those officers try to determine if the child had a toy gun, as the caller had suggested? No. Did they see anyone who was endangered by this child? No, there was no one else around. And after the officer shot the boy, did the police then look to see whether they could render any medical assistance, perhaps try to save the life of this poor youngster? They did not. They just stood there, looking at him. After a few minutes, Tamir's 14-year-old sister came outside and, horrified, tried to run to her brother. A police officer immediately bolted toward the girl, tackled her, and rolled on top of her. That girl, who had done nothing wrong at all, was handcuffed and forced to sit alone in the back of the patrol car. We can only imagine what it was like for her, staring out of the window at her little brother, who was dying on the sidewalk. Eventually, an ambulance came and Tamir was taken to a hospital, but the doctors couldn't save him, and he eventually was pronounced dead. Think of the awful impact that must have had on Tamir's sister, on his mom, on his dad, and other members of his family. Because this was a family like any other, like any of ours. This was a family that was engaged in the same kinds of activities as nearly all families, laughing and playing, working and studying, sometimes arguing. And yet this terrible, wholly unnecessary tragedy strikes them out of the blue. You and I need to think about terrible events like this one. We need to be aware of them. We need to try and think about ways to prevent them from occurring again. We need to discuss them with people that we respect. And we need to come to some personal conclusions about them, about how we feel about them, because they involve people who are part of the same society that we're a part of, and we should care about them. We are all woven like glittering, dynamic, creative, and unpredictable threads into the living fabric of American society. And whether we realize it or not, we are responsible for one another. When some of those societal threads fray, for whatever reasons, the fabric itself weakens. As we are all members of this American family, we should want that social fabric to be as strong and as tightly knit as possible. But you can't fashion a really strong society if you are basically indifferent when it comes to fellow members of that society. Another story. This is taken from my new book, which is called Losing Our Way. Jessica Gallardo's immediate goal was to graduate from high school, a modest objective for most youngsters, but a very heavy lift in her case. She was 19 and a senior at a school for struggling teens in Brooklyn. Jessica's family lived in a poor neighborhood, and it was poverty more than anything else that was making it difficult for her to get through school. When I first met her, she was supposed to graduate the following June, but she told me she didn't think she was going to make it. She was working full-time to help her mother pay rent, and when she explained what her job was like, I understood why she seemed overwhelmed. She worked for a company that sold baked goods to restaurants, supermarkets, and other businesses. Jessica's job was to lift loaves of freshly baked bread from a conveyor machine and box them for delivery. She and several other workers would do that for 8 or more hours each night. Now remember, this is a high school kid. I work from 4 in the afternoon to midnight, she said. But Sundays and Mondays, I work from 4 until 1 or 2 in the morning, and we have no breaks. What if you have to go to the bathroom, I asked. You can only do that if another machine is not busy, she said, because somebody else has to come and take your place so you can go to the bathroom real fast and come right back. For this dismal work, night after night, she was paid the minimum wage, which at that time was $7.25 an hour. As we continued to talk, it became clear that Jessica was maintaining a pace that was unsustainable. When I asked about her lunch break, she said, "We don't take any breaks at all. If you want to eat, you have to work and eat at the same time. So me personally, I don't eat. I just stay with the work. But my body is in so much pain because I have to stand in one spot for so many hours, picking up bread and packing it into the boxes." Each week, she took home about $250, which disappeared almost instantly. Jessica's father was a construction worker who had lost his job in the recession and had been unable to find steady work since then. Her mother had a minimum wage job as a seamstress. An older sister had 2 children and no job. There was also a younger sister, and all of them lived in an extremely cramped 4-room apartment in Brooklyn. I give my mother $100 every week, Jessica said. I have to pay $48 each week for my taxi and $14 for my bus. I take the bus to school in the morning, but I have to take the taxi home from work because it's late at night and my neighborhood is dangerous. It's an awful grind, she said, terrible. And all of this is affecting school because I'm just so tired that sometimes I get to school late and I miss one class. And because of that one class, I don't think I'm going to graduate. Her voice dropped to a murmur. She sounded very much like a kid, but her eyes, often sad, looked much older than 19. I really want to graduate, she said, but if I don't work, we won't have any place to live. Jessica's routine was not just wearying, it was cruel. Most of her time at work was spent willing herself not to eat and not to have to go to the bathroom. I just keep boxing the bread, she said. By the time I get home from work, it's after 1 o'clock, and then I have to do my homework. That can take till 3 in the morning. By then, it's very hard to think. Sometimes I fall asleep while I'm doing my homework. I'm hungry, but most of the time I don't eat. I'll just eat in the morning, and that's all I'll eat all day. And then right in the middle of our interview, Jessica began to cry. While I was talking with Jessica, I thought about my time in high school many years ago in Montclair, New Jersey. Those were carefree days for me. I worked odd jobs, but only by choice, because I wanted extra spending money, not because I had to help my parents pay rent. I had a Thunderbird by my junior year in high school, and most of my thoughts were about cars, girls, and rock and roll. I didn't think very much about people who were less well off than my family, and I took my more or less privileged status for granted. That was a mistake. What I've learned through hard experience and many years as a reporter and columnist is that all of us, the privileged and the poor alike, contribute, whether we know it or not, to the quality of the society in which we live. As I've noted, we're all in this together. And if we don't think about the kind of society that we're creating, all of us, we'll neglect it. We won't maintain and improve it. We won't cooperate with others who are trying to be constructive and forward-looking. And we won't lend a hand to those that we're fully capable of assisting. Eventually, without us even noticing, the society will deteriorate. And that's what has happened in the United States. That's what my book is about. The full title is Losing Our Way, an intimate portrait of a troubled America. Those of us who are not poor, whose families are not struggling, who don't have disturbing encounters with law enforcement, who never have to worry about having a roof over our heads on the coldest of evenings, may not even notice the kind of disasters facing families like those of Tamir Rice or Jessica Gallardo. But we should notice, because if all of us paid closer attention, we wouldn't let matters deteriorate to the point where Tamir Rice is blown away outside a recreation center for no reason at all, or Jessica Gallardo, a high school student, has to spend her nights toiling without even a bathroom break in a sweatshop that pays her nothing more than the minimum wage. There is a connection between the families of Tamir Rice and Jessica Gallardo that is not at first obvious. They are both on the poorer side of America's gaping income and wealth divide. When I was growing up, we were told that above all else, America was a fair and just society that offered splendid opportunities to everyone. Political leaders seemed most proud of what they described as America's vast middle class. That was the nation's proudest creation. We are now a nation in which the middle class has been largely hollowed out, leaving us with a small percentage of the population enjoying tremendous wealth and most other Americans struggling to make it from day to day. Let me try to show you how extreme this has become, because it may not seem obvious as you're going through your daily routine. A recent study by a pair of economists, one at Berkeley and the other at the London School of Economics, showed that the top 0.1% in the United States has nearly as much wealth as the bottom 90% combined. Now, that's not the 1% that has all that wealth. That's the top 0.1%. And let me show you how that plays out in real life. Until a year ago, the mayor of New York was Michael Bloomberg, one of the richest men in the United States. And when he left office, he was worth more than $30 billion. To get a sense of how much money that really is, consider this. If someone were to try to deplete all of Michael Bloomberg's wealth by spending it at the rate of $10,000 a day, That's $10,000 each and every day. Weekends and holidays, $10,000 every day. It would take 8,500 years to get rid of all that money. My grandmother would have said, nobody needs that much money. But while Bloomberg has more than $30 billion, his constituents, the residents of New York City, my city, are not quite as well off. Nearly a third of all the children in New York are poor. In one of the city's boroughs, the Bronx, nearly half of the children are in families that do not have sufficient access to food. They have to turn to food banks or soup kitchens or other options, or sometimes they go hungry. Homelessness is off the charts in New York. The shelters house more than 50,000 homeless people every night. More than 20,000 of those who are crammed into these dismal sanctuaries are children. 20,000 homeless children in the shelters in New York City every night. And still there aren't enough shelters for all of those who need them. Tons of people are turned away each night. Each morning as I walk the streets of my neighborhood, which is the affluent Upper West Side of Manhattan, I see people sleeping in doorways, on church steps, and in alleyways, sometimes in the freezing rain. In the recent bitter cold wave, city officials have had to patrol the streets looking for homeless people so they can bring them to makeshift facilities to prevent them from freezing to death. Bloomberg, of course, has no worries at all about being homeless. He is so rich, he disdained the mansion that the city provides for its mayors. He has about a dozen homes of his own, including a lavish 5-story Beaux-Arts townhouse on Manhattan's Upper East Side, a 33-acre estate in the Westchester County town of North Salem, and a 35-acre estate in the Hamptons. He also owns homes in Armonk, New York, Vail, Colorado, and Wellington, Florida. He has an estate in London and a mansion in Bermuda. This is a man who would have a lot of trouble relating to the homeless. These kinds of breathtaking extremes of income and wealth are an accurate portrait of our times. This is the atmosphere that America's children and teenagers are growing up in. My fear is that you will come to see these disparities as normal, as acceptable. The rich are becoming America's aristocracy, and the folks laboring in the Walmarts and the Wendy's and the McDonald's and the Chick-fil-A's, and the men and women cleaning our hotels and hospitals and vast corporate towers, and the anonymous people taking orders like so many automatons in the retail call centers, and people like Jessica Gallardo laboring anonymously in a bread factory until all hours of the night. These many millions of American men and women are becoming the peasantry of our times. As a society, we treat them the way peasants have always been treated, with callous disregard. In the face of all this, we should ask ourselves the question, is this the kind of country that we want? I personally don't think so. But as you graduate from this wonderful school and then move on to college and then out into the world at large, you'll have to face that question yourselves. What kind of country do you want America to be? My hope is that as a result of this talk, you'll think more seriously about some of the important issues facing our society. Why should the fortunate few have so much, while so many others face poverty, hunger, and homelessness? Why should the police treat people who come from different economic or ethnic groups more harshly than others? Why should a bright young boy or girl be denied a decent education because he or she is growing up in a family that is not particularly well off? I'll leave you with a final thought. If this is not the kind of country that you want America to be, don't make the mistake of thinking that you are powerless to change it. Some of the largest, most successful movements in our history were driven by young people just like yourselves. The courageous young men and women who sat in at the segregated lunch counters in the Jim Crow South of the 1960s were mostly college students. Some were beaten and many were jailed, but they would not give up. And they were a crucial component of the civil rights movement, which changed the face of this nation. In May of 1963, even younger children, boys and girls from the public schools of Birmingham, Alabama, marched in the face of fire hoses and police dogs to fight segregation in that city. Public school students, little boys and girls. The leaders of the women's movement were often quite young, and they radically changed the way women are treated in America. I could give you example after example. If you want to make a difference in the quality of American life, you can. I'm not asking you to march. I'm not asking you to protest. I'm not even asking you to change any views that you may now be holding. All I ask is that you take a little time from your busy schedules to think very seriously about the kind of society we live in. Discuss it with your friends. And if you come to the conclusion that we could be doing a lot better, then give some thought to how you can use your intelligence and talent and energy and creativity to help bring about that better America. Just think about it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.